Hi guys, today we're going to talk about the economic strength and how the Union and the Confederacy's economies compare. Okay, so first of all, the Union, remember, is the United States, and the Confederacy are the states that decided to leave the United States, mainly southern states, and they started the Confederacy. And when we talk about economy, we're talking about the money that's made and spent, basically. We're just talking about money. How do they make it? How do they spend it? What do they do with it? Okay, so we're going to start with this. It's a little bit long, so bear with me. As the war began, the North had more money and a thriving economy focused on manufacturing. Almost 90% of American factories were located in the North. More than 25% of the northern population lived in cities. Many worked in manufacturing, staffing northern factories. Agricultural was also mechanized in the North, requiring fewer people to produce food. In 1860, the North produced half of the corn, most of the wheat, and almost all of the oats for the entire nation. It accomplished this even though only 40% of the population in the North was involved in farming. All right, you guys, so what we're saying here in this paragraph is that the North, they had more money. Their economy, their trading, their selling, their producing, the way that they did their money, they were more successful at this point in time. We're talking about the year 1860. The South didn't have a lot of factories, but the North did. And just FYI, Maryland's in the North, was one of these states. Actually, Maryland was kind of borderline, but whatever. Anyway, almost 90% of American factories were located here in the North, and 25% of the population lived in the cities. So they worked in the factories, and they even took some of the agriculture or the farming and began to use machines to farm. So they were actually still able to produce corn and wheat and oats, even though not a large percentage of the population was still in farming, only about less than half, 40%. Right. Thus, the Union states, the United States, the states that were still decided to be in that kind of um, United States bubble under the Constitution, the United States were able to outproduce the Confederate States in almost every area, from weapons manufacturing to oats. Northern manufacturers of consumer goods were happy to convert their factories to produce weapons instead because they knew the federal government would be a good customer. Before and during the Civil War, the Union was able to manufacture weapons and provide military supplies to its soldiers at a much faster pace than the Confederacy. And one of the things we talked about, you guys, in the first reading was that the Union states, they had better weapons, and part of that was because the northern states were producing the weapons. They had factories where they could produce them and provide them to the government. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the southern states. Southern resources. The economy of the southern states developed in a different direction from that of the northern states. The southern economy was based on agriculture. Only 10% of the southern population lived in cities. 84% of the population was involved in agriculture, but the chosen crops were cotton and tobacco, not food. The South had vast amounts of land that were ideal for growing cotton and tobacco, but they relied on manual labor, usually done by enslaved people, rather than the farming machinery. Okay, so this paragraph is saying that the states in the South, the ones that left the Union or the United States, they did agriculture, which remember is farming, and they had vast amounts of lands. When we say vast, that just means a lot, big amounts, large lands that was open, but they didn't grow food. They grew cotton and tobacco, and they also didn't use machines like the North did. The North, remember, they made agriculture and they started using machines to do their farming. The South still used slaves and grew cotton and tobacco. Cotton was so profitable that whenever possible, farmland was devoted to it. Although the Southern economy depended overwhelmingly on agriculture, the South was a net importer of food. Once the war began, food imports from the Midwest ended. To feed the civilian population as well as the troops, land used for cotton and tobacco farming had to be converted to growing food crops. However, plantation owners resisted because grains and vegetables were much less profitable crops. Okay, so cotton made the South a lot of money. That's why they grew so much of it. They could grow it and sell it. People wanted to buy it. You can make lots of things out of cotton. A lot of our clothes are made out of cotton. So the South used their farmland and devoted it or made sure that it was used for cotton because that's where they could make money. Okay, so they got food imported in because food wasn't as profitable or didn't make them as much money. And remember, to import something means to bring it in. So once the Civil War started, they didn't have as much food coming in. So in order to be able to feed everyone, they had to take some of their land that they grew cotton on and start growing grains and vegetables. But the plantation or the farmer owners, they didn't really want to do this because they weren't going to make as much money over it. However, I don't know, you guys, I feel like it's pretty important to eat. It's important to have money too, but without food, we can't survive. So that's what's going on in the South. The Confederacy thought that the importance of cotton in the international market would bring military assistance from other nations. It was wrong. Although cotton was valued, it wasn't important enough to cause other nations to join the Southern cause. For instance, Britain, the largest importer of U.S. cotton, easily found other sources for cotton, its colonies in Egypt and India. Cotton and tobacco were not weapons, and they were not edible, so they did not help the South arm or feed its soldiers. So this paragraph is kind of reiterating what we just said. The cotton made the money, but it didn't give them any food, which the North had because they farmed and they used machines to do it. And they also built weapons, so the North had better weapons and they didn't have any weapons. So the Confederacy is definitely at a disadvantage when it's coming to the war. All right, let's talk about transportation. In transportation, the Union also had the advantage. The Union, the United States, it had 20,000 miles of railroad, which was 69% of the U.S. total. During the Civil War, the railroad continued to grow rapidly in the North. Railroads were important in commercial shipping and helped the military. New recruits, replacement troops, and active military units were able to travel quickly without tiring to destinations served by railroads. Weapons and supplies could easily be shipped to military units by rail. So this paragraph is just talking about how important railroads are. We still use our railroads today, right, you guys? And we have these huge cars that we can move stuff very quickly from one place to another. This is what they were doing during the Civil War time. Also, they could send people, they could send weapons, they could send food, anything they needed to send down to the troops, they could put on a railroad train and send it. And the North had the advantage. The Union had the advantage of that. The Union also had numerous ports that enabled the northern states to ship supplies to other northern ports and continue its trade with other nations. Northern shipyards continued to build ships during the war. So a port, you guys, is a place where you can dock your boat and go from the sea to the land. So the Union had ports and they could ship supplies by boat. The Confederacy had few ports, and the Union Navy was able to blockade them. The blockades hindered the Confederacy in its attempts to sell cotton to other nations, reducing the Confederacy's trade income dramatically. The lack of resources, money, and labor prevented the Confederacy from expanding its railroads during war. So the Confederacy didn't have many ports, so places in the water where they could put their boats. Because the Union Navy was bigger, the ones that they did have, the Union was like, not happening. We're going to block it. You're not going to be able to come in here. Okay. So the Confederacy, they didn't have a lot of resources. They didn't have a lot of money, and they couldn't expand their railroads. So they were again at a disadvantage. The North, they had all these things. They had wealth, they had weapons, they had food, they had the railroads. Okay. So the North has these advantages. Natural resources. The Union had an abundance of natural resources. Metals could be mined for use in manufacturing. Lumber was used for building. The soil was rich enough for farming, and the farm machinery increased the yield. So the Union had lots of natural resources, so lots of things out there they could use. They could use metals. They could make the metals, take the metals in the factories and use them. They had trees that they could make cut down, create lumber. You can build with trees. The soil they could farm, and they had machinery which increased the yield, which means how much they were able to produce. Because remember, the Union used machines to farm. They could do it a lot quicker. They could produce more than the Confederacy. The South did not have numerous mines or large forests. Instead, the states of the Confederacy had developed by selling cotton and tobacco to buy the natural resources they needed. When the ports were closed by blockades, resources became scarce. They destroyed railroads to melt the iron needed to produce weapons and ammunition. In some locations, churches melted adornments and bells to make cannonballs and other ammunition. The Southern forces did have a resource advantage, however. Because the war was largely fought in the South, Southern generals often had the advantage in choosing the terrain for battles, and the army did not have to ship supplies across enemy terrain. Okay, so the South, they didn't have large mines. So a mine is where you go down and you can find the metals. The North had those. They didn't have large forests, so they didn't have lumber to build with. But the states in the Confederacy, remember, they had cotton and tobacco. That's how they made their money. So they would sell that, and that's how they would get things that they needed. Okay, remember, the North, they would block the ports of the Confederacy, so they couldn't bring anything in. But I can tell you that in the South, in order to get metal, to get ammunition, they would go to the churches and they would melt the adornments. So, like the sculptures that you see at a church, if they were made of metal, they would take these off, or like a doorknob or any type of decoration that was made of metal, and they would melt them to make their cannonballs and their other ammunition. Okay. The Southern forces, though, the one main advantage they had, the North had all these other things. They had resources, they had railroads, they had money, they had food, they had weapons. But the one thing that the South had was they had the home field advantage. Okay, we talked about that earlier in the year, how it's important to have the home field advantage because the war was fought mainly in the South. The South kind of chose where the battles took place, and they didn't have to ship their supplies across enemy terrain or enemy territory, which the North did. In order to get our supplies here, we had to bring them past the enemy, and sometimes it didn't work. And this way, they also knew the land better, which was an advantage. So, that's the end of this one. If you have any questions, contact me during my office hours. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.